Hi team, I wanted to share a little video with you. It's such an honor and a privilege to be on a team with such wonderful individuals. I'm standing here on the Great Wall of China, one of the 8 wonders of the world created by man, and it's actually got a phenomenal story. You know, in 2021 BC was the first time that they built this wall because there was great risk. You had the marauders to the north over there, and then you had the villages of civilization here to the east. And so what they did is they built this wall. It took 10 years, over 1 million men. There were only 5 million people in the entire country of China, and literally over 500,000 of them died. But they built the wall to protect themselves from risk. Then in literally 20 AD, they actually built a second wall. And that was the Silk Road. A lot of people have heard of the Silk Road that enabled trade between the east and the west. But what most people don't know is that in the 14th century, they actually built this wall again, which was now built out of brick. You can see the brick behind me here. It took them over 100 years, and literally it's 6,000 kilometers long. And you know, I thought it represents something, but it's something that people don't understand is this is where the internet started. Because on these turrets, you can see them all the way along here, when there was danger coming from over there, they would set fires, they would use smoke signals from tower to tower to tower, all the way down. And then a man would ride on a horse through to the Forbidden City, wake up the emperor, bring the armies and protect themselves from the marauders and the risk from the north. And this was the very first time that information and education information was able to travel so quickly. And I think it represents what we are trying to do so wonderfully, because the Great Wall of China is such a phenomenal metaphor for this barrier between East and West, for this barrier between the haves and the have-nots. And you know, they say in bold, you know, literally in that book where they were actually interviewing the guys and Peter Diamandis, and they said, you know, you've got to find a grand challenge out there, and then you've got to go and put yourself in front of that wave, and you've got to wait for it to arrive. And it's got to be something that you're passionate about, and a purpose, and have a real purpose in life. Money will not be your purpose. You've got to have a purpose to change the world. You know, as the founder of Google says, you know, are you doing something to change the world? And when you look at something like this, over 100 years, 6,000 kilometers to be able to be created, I really think, you know, when you look at JFK in 1961, he said, we are going to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. It will bring out our potential. You know, ladies and gentlemen, when you look at building this great wall, partners and friends, they set themselves a challenge, not because it was hard, but because it was easy. They had a purpose. They knew what they were going to do. When you look at Uber, you know, people look at Uber now, and they, you know, I heard a fascinating stat. $25,000 invested in Uber 18 months ago is worth $120 million today. People look at it and they go, it was easy. I guarantee you, people all over the world said it'll never happen. You'll be taking on taxi bosses. Taxi bosses have dodgy friends. In Australia, taxi bosses are so dodgy, they don't even get any tax allowances. They literally are deemed by the tax collector as the dodgiest industry, so that they can, you know, but they don't pay their VAT and everything else. And yet Uber took them on, not just locally, they thought global. They took them on locally, but they thought globally. And as they expanded all over the world, not only did they drop the cost, not only did they increase the efficiency, not only did they break down these great barriers to entry like this Great Wall of China, but also they increased accessibility. They vastly increased the user experience. I sit here in Beijing, I cannot speak a word of English, and yet literally one of my colleagues was charged $600 to go from the airport to his hotel because he knew no different. We've been swindled, they've tried to swindle us, and then we found out they had Uber. Now I can just take out my phone, I can click on the app, I can put in the address, and I can be dropped off exactly where I want to go. It is absolutely wonderful. Trust, transparency, and the interests being aligned. And so what is our challenge? What is our Great Wall of China? What does our future look like? Well, firstly, we've got the wealth gap. It's the greatest challenge that we have on this planet, the difference between the haves and the have-nots. We're also taking on an old industry in terms of the real estate industry. It's one of the most established industries out there, you know, almost as long as prostitution. It's also one of the most archaic industries, one of the slowest moving industries, one of the most lack of transparent industries, and that suits them because they've got so many fees and there's so many middlemen. We're taking on the financial industry, we're taking on the wealth industry, and they basically control the regulators. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. If they didn't control the regulators, why after 2009 were the banks actually empowered, not effectively taken out for creating all the trouble? Why is Sharemax founders not in jail for literally daylight robbery, fraud and stealing? And why are they trying to stop things like crowdfunding, where you've got trust, transparency, quality information and quality partners? We're taking on the regional challenges, just like Uber. It's not about just succeeding in Johannesburg or Cape Town or Atlanta or Brisbane or London. We're going everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. We need to understand how to invest in Shanghai as badly as we need to understand how to invest in Singapore. We need to find trusted partners all over the world. But the beauty is, we can do it. And on top of that, we've got tax, we've got compliance. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a small challenge. This is not a little sea castle at the beach. This is the Great Wall of China, ladies and gentlemen. My dear partners, we have taken on one of the greatest, grandest challenges on this planet. But as Peter Diamante says, and as Larry Page says from Google, if you are not prepared to take on a great and grand challenge, then you will not create a billion-dollar company. If you cannot empower 1 billion people and change the lives of 1 billion people, if you cannot change the world, you will not create a billion-dollar company. And so I also want to share with you a little story that's a very similar metaphor to this Grand Wall of China, Great Wall of China, and that is Turin. Turin was, he actually invented or wrote about the computer in the late 20s. In the 30s, he started building it. In the 40s, 1940, he actually broke the German code machine. I highly recommend going out there and watching the movie about him. It's called, I can't remember anyway, but it's a very good movie. And unfortunately, no one understood him. Everyone thought he was weird, and in 1950, he killed himself. In the 60s, people that were using computers were seen as geeks. Only in the 80s did the financial industry start to embrace computers. Only in the 90s did the general public start to embrace computers. Only in the 2000s did it start to become mainstream. And only today has mobile revolution. Literally, most of us can't even live without it. I mean, literally, it has taken over 80 years. But because of Moore's law, things double on top of each other every single 18 months. And that is why we have extrapolation. That is why we have exponential. That is why linear and traditional, the 20th century businesses are no longer working, and why exponential takes time to get started but then has such momentum. That is why it is not going to take 600 years to build a solution of 6,000 kilometers in terms of where you are. If you look at the stock market from the 1950s, it took on average 8 years for a stock to trade. The stock market in London and the stock market in New York were hugely wide apart. In fact, when the Titanic went down, people only found out about it literally, weeks later when they read about it in the tabloids. But now information transfers so quickly. All the financial institutions are linked, and things go up and down literally over in milliseconds, in nanoseconds in terms of where it is. In the 1990s, REITs didn't even exist. People, do you know that in 1990 everyone said that REITs weren't going to take off and that they were a dodgy structure and they couldn't be trusted and there was a lot of risk and that we must use the more traditional models? People do not like change. And yet today, 30 years later, REITs are the way to invest in real estate, certainly in the first world, in more than 90% of investment financial instruments. And so I set us a challenge, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go out there and change the world. Let's create a grand solution. We are taking on a grand challenge, but let's go out there and empower 1 billion people. Let's solve the wealth gap within our life. Let's do what Zig Ziglar says. If help enough other people get what they want, you can have anything that you want. Let's go out there and create a global solution. We want to help people create wealth locally, and then we want to help them think globally. And through Wealth Create, they can create wealth locally. And through Wealth Migrate, they can invest wealth all over the world and literally get access to the best information and the best partners. Through the Wealth University, they can get access to the best education, the best systems, and the best partners. And through the Wealth Movement, we can come together, we can collaborate, and we co-create a better future, a better and more sustainable future for all. And so I found out today that my animal, I was born in the year of the dragon. It is about power and prosperity. Please, live your power, live your prosperity. Let's go out there and do something which is great. Let's go out there and have a purpose for your life. Set ourselves a grand challenge. And like this Great Wall of China, when you put your mind to something, you will achieve it and you will solve one of the greatest challenges the planet has ever faced. I join you and I look forward to participating with you and having fun as we make this happen. Cheers.